Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to talk to you about what cancer is, and when in the cell cycle cancer occurs, and also what various lifestyle choices can lead to an increased chance of getting cancer, as well as mutations and stuff. So I'm going to start with defining what makes a cancer cell different from a normal cell, and that is that cancer cells divide completely chaotic and out of control, and they divide at a much quicker and sporadic rate. This cell right here is actually a microscopic image of a cancer cell, and you can see that it's kind of got these fibers around it, and it's a little bit misshapen, which is very characteristic of a cancer cell. So just keep in mind that that's what they look like. I tried to find a picture of a normal cell under the microscope, but I was having problems. So sorry that I don't have a comparison, but that is indeed a cancer cell. So when does cancer form? Well, we talked about how the cell cycle has a very, very important step in the S phase, and that is that DNA actually copies itself. So here we have this cell with one copy of the DNA, and we're going to double it when we go into G2. So from G1, where you have one copy, through S and into G2, you're actually going to copy every single chromosome in that cell. So now our cell has actually copied the DNA, and you can see right here, there is a change in this DNA strand, and that change is called a mutation. You can think of a mutation as sort of a typo in the copying process of going from one DNA strand here to two. And in this particular DNA, we have a change, and that change is going to cause potential issues in that new cell that would receive that DNA. So that mutation is just a little change. I was going to go back and label that this cell would be in G1, and then in the S phase, it would copy into two different chromosomes. In this case, if there's just one to begin with. And then in G2, now you have this cell with this mutated little piece. So a big question that a lot of students always ask me is, wait, so do all mutations lead to cancer? That's a big no. Unfortunately, mutations aren't what you see in comic books. They're not going to give you like amazing superpowers where you can spider your way up walls and shoot webs or see through things or fly, but they don't always give you cancer either. As a matter of fact, mutations are normal. They happen thousands of times. And that may seem scary, but actually your cells are prepared and equipped for these copying errors, aka mutations. We have protections in our body that help us, which I'm going to mention later. So just make a note that mutations, they could be neutral. They could happen in parts of the DNA that don't really code for any proteins. They could be good, very rarely, and they could, be bad as well. But if one thing is true about all mutations, it's that most of them are fixed in interphase before mitosis even happens. Luckily for us, the cell is going to actually prevent 99% of all mutations from passing on from one cell into future cells. And I've got three major natural protections to list for you. The first one, this is a cell that has been damaged by maybe environmental factors. Maybe I went out in the sun, forgot my sunscreen, and now I have sunburn and I've damaged some of my cells in my skin. And you can see that it has got a little piece of damaged DNA right here. So this cell hasn't even copied its DNA yet. Every cell has a really special protein called P53. And this gene actually prevents S phase from ever happening, meaning that this cell won't even get to copy its DNA and it won't even get close to mitosis because it is damaged and dangerous, and we definitely don't want two of it. This cell is actually going to exit the cell cycle and then be marked for doom, meaning that it is going to be destroyed. Apoptosis is definitely going to destroy this cell, but that's okay because it's dangerous, so we don't need more. So the second bit is, what if a cell is got normal DNA to begin with, and then that cell does go into the S phase and copy the DNA. In this case, there wasn't a mutation before, but there was a mistake in copying that DNA in the S phase. And now we have this little mutation here. And we have to get rid of it before the cell moves on to divide. So there are little proteins that will go in and replace this mutation with the correct DNA. So it's almost like if I accidentally mistyped a word in a paper and I backspaced and then typed in the correct letters. So now basically what we have is a normal cell, and it's going to go divide like normal and nothing bad's going to happen. So for the third part, what if we have DNA damage and in the S phase and it kind of goes unchecked and it doesn't get fixed? Because sometimes in the cell, mistakes are just overlooked. Just like when I proofread my paper, sometimes I don't catch every little thing that I did wrong. So in some cases, you kind of have two scenarios here. If the DNA is damaged and it gets caught, sometimes that cell will be destroyed. And other times, the cell divides, and honestly, that mutation just kind of slips through the cracks and passes on. In this case, down here, when that mutation passes on, it doesn't necessarily mean something bad's going to happen. It just means maybe you get sunspots, wrinkles, and it kind of is part of the aging process that mutations slip through the cracks and continue. But, sometimes bad things do happen, like cancer, as a result of a mutation getting passed on from one cell to the new cell. When natural protections fail, that mutation is just going to get passed on when that cell divides. So that means that you will have not just one cell, but two or even three or four that may have that mutation. So in this picture, because only one of the two DNA strands is mutated, only one of the new cells is going to get it. But once that cell divides, now you're going to have even more cells with that mutation. And mutations aren't always going to be cancer, like I said earlier. So sometimes, maybe these cells just look older in age. You get wrinkled, you get sunspots, you get damage on your skin, you have damage in your organs, don't work as efficiently. But sometimes when a mutation affects cell cycle regulation genes, that is when you get cancer. When a cell's DNA is changed, it changes its function by default. Change the structure, change the function. So when a cell inherits instructions for the cell cycle, which is interphase and mitosis, and those instructions say divide whenever you want, it doesn't matter how many cells are around you, it doesn't matter where you can divide wherever, that is when your cells are now out of control. Having that changed DNA that controls the cell cycle is one of the biggest reasons why cancer cells are different than normal cells. So this is going to cause the other changes in structure of the cancer cell. So because DNA is mutated in the cell cycle gene, this is going to cause cancer to divide uncontrollably, and it's just going to cause these massive lumps called tumors. So normal cells have a sense of personal space. So when they're bumping up against each other, that is a signal to those cells to not divide anymore. And it's called density-dependent inhibition. And when cancer cells bump into each other, they just don't care. They have no sense of space, and it forms these giant lumps. So besides forming a giant tumor, cancer can also do one other thing normal cells can't, and that is that cancer can actually spread from one location to another and keep dividing. Normal cells can't do that. A kidney cell stays in the kidney and it doesn't divide anywhere else. Cancer cells can go from organ to organ. This causes issues because the more regions of the body the cancer is in, the harder it is to get rid of. Sometimes cells have the mutations that in the cell cycle gene that causes them to make tumors, but those cells actually aren't able to spread, and that is when a tumor is considered benign. When a tumor is consisted of cells that have the ability to spread throughout the body, they are called malignant tumors. So this is how cancer cells behave once you actually have cancer cells. But the real question, especially in this class, is what can you do to prevent getting cancer, and what lifestyle choices can actually increase your odds of getting cancer? Substances that can actually increase the rate of mutations that your cells experience have a name, and they're called carcinogens. These substances can take many forms. They could be anything from cigarettes, they could be tanning beds and UV rays, radiation, X-rays, MSG in certain foods. And what all of these carcinogens have in common is that they are environmental factors, meaning that it has nothing to do with your genetics. It's all what you're exposed to in your lifetime, and that they increase the mutation rate. So why is an increased mutation rate bad? Well, an increased mutation can cause you to age a lot faster. It can cause skin damage if it's a UV ray related mutation. And the more mutations you have, the more are going to slip through the cracks and persist in all of the cells that divide after that mutation occurs. The odds of having a mutation in the genes that code for the cell cycle, that regulate the cell cycle, and odds of having a mutation that's going to mess up the cell cycle in a way that makes it overactive and cause cancer increases exponentially with the more mutations that occur in your cells. And the fact of the matter is that carcinogens cause you not to just have hundreds of more mutations, but thousands to millions more mutations than an average person who is not exposed to those carcinogens. They've actually done studies with twins where one person smoked and the other doesn't, just to compare how hard smoking is on your cells and how many more mutations that you experience. You can see in this picture that twin A is a non-smoker and twin B has smoked for decades. And the amount of damage and mutations that have occurred in twin B's skin cells, and that's just the skin, no telling the damage and mutations that have occurred on various organs, is really, it's significant. This is just one of many examples of how lifestyle and environmental choices can increase mutation rate, which can cause both aesthetic appearance to change. It can cause organs like the lungs to be affected, and can increase your chances of getting cancer. And that's all I've got for this video. I hope it's helped.